mentioned that I don't like the D word, diversity. I don't really use it that much. I use the words people not like you. Because my definition of diversity is way broader than just racial and ethnic diversity. My definition of diversity is any way you can be different from me. Do you have children, ma'am? She has children. I don't. We're both women. We're both white. Let's just say we're the same age. I can tell you're way younger, okay, but let's just say. So we're both women, we're both white, let's say we're the same age, let's say we live in the same zip code, and let's say that we even make the same household income. On paper, she and I would look the same. We have all these demographic characteristics in common. But you know and I know that if you have children and I don't, we're going to be different in every way that really matters. She's going to make decisions differently than I am. The pressures and priorities on her are going to be different than mine. And that has nothing to do with our race, our gender, our age, or anything. It simply has to do with parenthood. So my list of diversity is very broad. Here's my list. Yours could be different. Gender. Men are different from women, right? And it really is true. I mean, there's comedians who make their entire living riffing off of this, but it really is true. Women use something like 20,000 more words a day than men. I know, my husband, I've been married a long time, and apparently I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but you know. I was apparently telling him about my day once in excruciating detail, and I guess he'd had enough, because he goes like this to me. He goes, "What is that?" It's like trying to mute me. Don't do that. If you value the woman in your life, do not do that. Sleep on the couch for 2 nights. All right. But women are also more demonstrative than men. We're much more likely to hug and kiss and express emotion. Religious differences. There's no doubt that there's all kinds of religions that we're dealing with now. Political views. And I don't just say this and throw this up here because we just went through a contentious political election. We've always had our differences. Age and generational differences. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. There's no doubt that someone who's a mature or a baby boomer is very different than someone who's Gen X or Gen Y. The LGBTQ community, and in case you're wondering what the Q stands for, it stands for questioning. Physical abilities, emotional abilities, mental abilities. How about rural versus metro? Who would understand this better than you? Someone who lives in a loft in Manhattan is very different than someone who lives on, a farm in West Texas or a ranch in West Texas. So even rural areas and metro areas can be different. What about military civilian? There's 2 totally different worlds. Race. There's only 5. Everyone on the planet falls into one of these 5 races. Everything else is a term. White, black, Asian, Native American, Pacific Islander. These are the terms. So there's no such race, for example, as Caucasian. There's no such race as Asian. Those are terms. They're not bad terms. They're not racist. They're just not correct. These are the correct terms for race. There's no such race as African American. The correct term is black. So white, black, Asian, Native American, Pacific Islander doesn't mean people don't have preferences. I know a lot of people who self-describe themselves as Caucasian or whatever. I'm just saying these are the 5 races. But of course, we also have ethnic and linguistic differences. Hispanic is not a race. It's an ethnicity. Or if you're from India, then your race is Asian, but your ethnicity is Indian. Speaking of that, nativity. I think somebody who's foreign-born would look at the United States and the world with a very different lens than someone who's U.S.-born. Life stage. Who would know this better than you? A new mom or a new dad is in a very different place, emotionally, financially, everything, than someone who's an empty nester, a retiree, or a college student. White collar and blue collar. Those are 2 totally different worlds. Even professional level, somebody who's entry level and has been working for 6 months is very different than someone who's been working for 3 decades. Core values. If you take that plastic bottle of water when you're finished with it and you throw it into the recycling bin versus the trash, that is the simplest little action in the world that you're doing. Just tossing it into one bin versus another. But it tells me something about you. It tells me something about your values. Maybe I'm trying to do my part. Make sure it goes into the recycling bin. What about things like different education levels? High school, college, etc. Introverts versus extroverts. Anybody work with somebody who's really introverted or somebody who's very extroverted? They have totally different work styles. Some people like to work alone. Other people are much more collaborative. Creative versus analytic thinking. Corporate versus nonprofit sector. Office workers versus people who work from home. marital status, parents versus non-parents, and even within parents. You have single parents, step parents, etc. And what about even regional differences? The North and the South are different. The East Coast and the West Coast are different. The list goes on and on.